There was a question we had about the word Bacardi. So if you look in the Red Dictionary, page 69, some people have said they still don't know how to use this dictionary, so I'm just trying to run through this. Part of what we were doing in the class is saying you break down the word. So you could look at what does it mean to have Tod Yod? What about Resh Tav? What about Het Resh? What about Bet Het? And then look at Resh Tav Yod and Het Resh Tav and Bet Het Resh. And you break down the word into those little pieces. You could look at the Yod as a suffix, you could look at the Bet as a prefix, and you get the different things that construct that word. But to just be brief about this, the word Bet Het you won't find here on page 68, but you will find a Bet Het Vav Nun. And when you have a Vav Nun at the end, it basically puts something into the form of a noun or something of substance. And what it says is watchtower. It also says examiner, to be examined or tested. And then that's with a nun instead of a resh. And so the nun at the end is, we talked before that it has to do with somebody engaged in the action of doing it. But if you change the nun to a resh, and remember resh means the top of the head, the exalted man, if you give you a reference, if you arbitrarily change the last letter, you could look through the dictionary under everything starting with a Bet Het. See what's there. Bet Het Aleph, Bet Het Bet, Bet Het Gimel, Bet Het Dalet, and you'll see what changing each letter does to the prefix root. But to put Bet Het Resh on there, you get chosen, elected. You also get a young man, Bachor, Bet Het Vav Resh, or a young girl is Bet Het Vav Resh, Hey. So we talked about before, when you add the Hey at the end of a word, it makes it a feminine form. A period of youth, youngster. Bet Het Nun means to examine or test, to distinguish, differentiate. Examination, trial, test, assayer, auditor. An assayer is one where you bring your gold and you bring it to the assay office, back in the old Western days, and they see how good the gold is, you might say. It means to be young, and it's also where you get the word for a warrior, a young man. It's related to an Akkadian word. The idea here is that you could say, well, I'm thinking that this has to do with somebody that Yahweh chose, meaning one of the chosen, one of the elect, one of the predestined. But it could be anything he chose, and if the Tav is the sign of the covenant, and Yod as a suffix means my, that you could say, well, that what has he chosen to be the sign of the covenant? So here's the point that I was trying to make regarding this flag and regarding this book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Kersey Graves, comparing Jesus to Krishna or Dionysius or anybody else. I was going through this list of the 350 or so different points that are equal, and it says the very interesting thing. Jesus was born on December 25th. That's what all of his followers say. So was every other sun god. Krishna and Dionysius and Bacchus and Tammuz and all these guys. And it's like, wait a minute. But Yeshua wasn't born on December 25th. And I said earlier in the class that Jesus Christ is a mythical fiction. Why? Why would I say such blasphemy, heresy? The word Jesus, starting with the letter J, didn't exist in any language until about 500 years ago. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. If you had two letter I's next to each other, the second one was elongated and became the letter J, which is why both the I and the J are in the same place, supplied by the Y sound of Yahweh or Yeshua. So there was no angel that said to his mother, thou shalt name his name Jesus, the name above all names, at the sound of which every knee should bow. It's not Jesus. It can't be. Jesus, if anything, came from a Greek word, Jesus, S-U-S, similar to Zeus, but S-U-S was the typical ending for a Greek masculine singular. It's grammar. And there was a Druid deity spelled H-E-S-U-S. There are those that suggest that Constantine, literally, assembled his men together at the Council of Nicaea, and for a couple years had them scour the world and accumulate the stories of the Messiah figures, the Christ figures from around the empire, and they were supposed to come back and concoct a conglomerate religion which they could unify the empire with. Mithra. The word is Sol Invictus Mithra, or the invincible sun, S-O-L, sun god, was the chief deity of the Roman Empire with Constantine. He had the vision of the sign of the cross. Under this sign, conquer. It became the symbol of Christianity because he took all these other religions, the Hebrew concept of the Mashiach, with the Mithra from Persia, and some Osiris from Egypt, and from Babylon, and from the British Isles, and from India, and from China and Africa and the New World. All these things were compiled and became Christianity. Now, we who were brought up under the Christian teaching were told, as I said earlier, tough luck for those other guys that inherited the wrong teaching. They're all doomed to hell. That's why the white man's burden is to go out and teach the gospel to every creature and get them to be convinced. And so you get this picture of the fair-skinned, complected, long, nice golden hair and the blue eyes, and this is Jesus the Christ. There's a lot of people that suggest that he was actually a black man. And it says in Isaiah, if you read that as a prophecy, that says he had no form that we should consider him even worth looking at. It was probably, get this guy out of my face. Who does he think he is? He was probably disgusting, maybe kind of gross if you read Isaiah. They were happy to tear him up and get him out of them. My point is, we've been handed a bunch of stuff that not only isn't true, it looks like it's got the fingerprints of sun god worship all over it, including December 25th. Christ Mass. Mass comes from the death. The letter Tav, the last letter. You ever hear anybody say Shabbos, meaning Shabbat? Why? It's because the Tav can be pronounced as an S, a TH, or a T, depending on the dialectic sort of area that you're from. So Mass is also mat. Mat is the Hebrew word mem tav for dead body or corpse. So Christ Mass has to do with taking the wafer and that whole thing regarding the... So you could say, well, Mary, well, in Hebrew, the word mem resh has to do with bitterness. So to invoke a Merry Christmas from a Hebrew perspective would be to say the bitterness of the only way that it could be merry from our point of view is to say, let's get this bitterness out of our mouth of the lies and the distortions and put Christ to death. Because Christ in Greek was any political figure. It wasn't the special one, the anointed one. Mashiach, Messias, that's Greek for Messias, Mashiach, but Christ was any big shot, any honcho, your boss, the president, any guy that you give him a certain regard could be a Christ. This word Mashiach, if you want to know what it means, go through the dictionary and we'll break it apart a little bit like this. How do you know who the Mashiach is? If you read this story in this other book about Krishna, of course we were just talking to Gita and he said Krishna was no nice guy. We're not going to the story of him. That's not about him. He was no respectable figure. Though according to this other book, there's 350 ways that he looked and sounded just like Jesus Christ. The word Mashiach is spelled, I don't have a pen here, Mem Shin Yod Het. Mem as a prefix can mean, in the Red Dictionary, from, the point of view of, because of, away from, but the place of. So it can mean away from or at the place that's not away from, but the place at. So as we talked earlier in the class, these different words can mean one thing and its opposite. But I'm just saying that the word Mashiach, it may be helpful to write it, but I just don't see those, what happened to them. Here's one. Mem, Shin, Yod, Chet. So if you take the Mem, it can be the place of or the one who. And then if you look at Mem, Shin, Yod, it means to touch or to feel. It's the word for silk. Silk is that which feels smooth. And it's where we get the word mushy. How do you know something's mushy? Well, it feels like it's mushy. That's mushy. Mem, Shin, Yod. If you look at just Shin, Yod, it's a gift or a present or a thing desired. If you look at Shin, Yod, Chet, it means to speak, talk, converse, musing, or meditation. Shin, Yod, Het, Hey, just to put the feminine ending on it, doesn't turn it into anything girly, but the idea is like Zadik is the righteous one, Zadikah is righteousness, or the revealing of righteousness. So the feminine form basically is the expression of. So if you put a Hey at the end of Shin, Yod, Het, what it means is talk, conversation, discourse, or it actually then, you go to this root of Shin, Het, Hey, if you take the Yod out, because those are like wild cards, like I said, you can put Vavs and Yods in there, and it basically talks about a pit or a ditch, or to swim, which means something you look down, and so to bow your head in reverence. Here's the pictures. Remember earlier in the class I was talking about everything has these pictures, not just words. So you could say when you are meditating, your head maybe is like you're pondering, or you're looking down, or you maybe are reflecting or praying, or you're looking into a laver where the laver was made out of the mirrors of the women. And so there's this picture. When you swim, you put your head down and you swim in a ditch. All these words have to do with Shin, Het. So you put these together and you end up with the fact that the Mem, Shin, Yod, Het is the one sent to converse, to communicate. The word Mashiach does mean to anoint or to paint, as with oil, or a painter is a Mashiach, literally. One who puts plaster or drywall mud on the wall, he's a Mashiach. To measure, a land surveyor is a Mashiach. It's one who measures and determines. It's also the king or the high priest. So you could say the one sent to measure, to determine, that has to do with communicating, discourse, speaking. Speaking what? If there was one sent from the heavenly realm who would indeed be this manifestation of the Creator in human form, what's he going to be talking about? Well, the interesting thing is I went through this whole list of the 350 comparisons between Yeshua, or Jesus, and Krishna. There was something lacking. First of all, they said that Jesus was born on December 25th, as was these other sun gods. Yeshua was not. He was born during the festivals. It fits these other patterns. Some say it was Yom Teruah, some say the first day of Sukkot. Nevertheless, it was keyed to the festivals because that's Yahweh's appointed times. The other thing I noticed is that there was no mention in that list of 350 of any of these things. No mention of the Sabbath day, no mention of the Mishkan, no mention of the festivals. Wonderful things about how to be nice to one another. But it's like, what did Yahweh give us to reference him by? Now, if you know Tony Robinson's studies, he's talking about chiastic structure, which is where you can follow, you get a list, and the first one meets the last one, and then the next one, and the next one, the next one, and the next one, and you end up in the middle. The Jewish scribes have a thing called atbash. Aleph matches to Tav, Bet to Shin, Kuf to Gimel, Resh to Dalet, and you end up in the middle. And where do you end up in the middle? Where do you end up in the middle of the letter Chi in Greek, where they get, is the X shape. So the chiastic structure is an X shape, which happens to be the sign of the covenant. What is right in the middle, well, on this flag here it's the menorah, but what's right in the middle of the alphabet? It's these two colors in purple, which is the Kaf and Lamed. And as we discussed in the class, it represents the Torah. The one thing missing from that list of what Krishna or Dionysius or Osiris or any of these other guys had was that they have no regard of the Torah. Specifically, the Torah as it gives prestige to Yud He Vav He alone, which Yeshua did, but not Jesus. You see, Jesus, if he changed the Shabbat, changed anything regarding the pattern of the Mishkan or the festivals, which are all key, these are the same pattern. They're not three separate things. They're all the same pattern, which is what we said in the class. If he changed any of it, he changed the DNA, as it were, of Yud He Vav He. Now here's another little problem. There's a verse that talks about the name of the Father and the name of the Son. I believe that's in Psalms. I forget where that is. Psalms or Proverbs. The point is, people say that Yahweh is the name of the Father and Yeshua is the name of the Son. I think we ought to have a discussion and find out whether that's true. I don't think Yahweh is the name of the Father. You go back to Exodus chapter 3, Moses at the burning bush, and he heard the voice speaking, and he says, "Who shall I say sent me?" And he says, "Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh." It's translated in the Christian Bible, "I am that I am." It's translated in the Jewish Tanakh, "I shall be what I shall be." When we have our next class, later on in January, we'll talk about that later, we're going to go through, and that's the first one on the list. What does it mean? Well, there's a different way to read that other than simply "I am" or "I shall be," but it speaks about his identifying himself. The answer to Moses' question, "Who shall I say sent me?" was "Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh." Added to that, he said, Yud He Vav He is my Shem Zakar. Shem, name. Zakar means reputation. It doesn't just mean reputation. We went through this during the class. If you look in the Red Dictionary, it also means masculine. It means man or group of man, and it's a sharp pointy tool like a shovel that you stick into the ground to open it up and plant a seed in. That's Yud He Vav He. It's kind of like the family name, or it's that vehicle that he uses to dispense his seed. If you look at the parables in the New Testament that Yeshua gave, the seed was the Word, and the Word would take root inside of you, or it'd come to life and grow and develop and produce the fruits of righteousness. All these pictures are wrapped up, but he said Yod He Vav He was the vehicle, the tool, the apparatus that he would use. And the He is a witness. The He is a witness or a testifier, a testimony. Vav of which is also basically that which connects, something holding together to the two witnesses. So you have the picture of the menorah, where you have the shemesh, the servant candle in the middle, and you have the two sides of the menorah as the two witnesses that are lit by the shemesh, the servant candle in the middle. When people are doing Hanukkah this next week, they take the center candle and they light, of course the Hanukkah candle has 8 arms, this has 6. My point is there's pictures. There's pictures in the patterns. But the two sides of the witness of Yeshua was that he said he came as the Torah made flesh, and he then said and did everything that the Torah said to do, and he told his followers to do likewise. He says, I only do what I see my Father doing, and I only say what I hear my Father saying. And you guys should repeat my words and repeat my actions. You guys should look just like me. Paul, as a matter of fact, who supposedly gave us Christianity and changed everything, said, follow me as I follow Mashiach. But he himself was a Jewish rabbi of rabbis, a Pharisee of Pharisees, the one who kept the Torah. He didn't do away with it. So I maintain this. The Torah itself, remember, if it lines up with Kaf and Lamed, the Kaf is like an open hand, like a filter. Like you pour water in your hand. Well, it'll go right through. But pour something solid in your hand and it stays in there. Some things fall through and something, it's a filter, like a shower grate, like a grate on the bottom of the floor, a barbecue grill. That's the Kaf. It's a filter. Lamed, literally Lamed Bet is the word for heart, which is a pump. So here you have the circulatory system of the heart and the kidneys, as it were, between Lamed and Kaf. And the word Lamed Kaf means to you, and the word Kaf Lamed means all. We already went through this these other weeks, but what I'm saying is that the Torah is all of this to you, which is the pump and the filter, the teaching and learning, the processing of what belongs in the kingdom and what doesn't. And for any other avatar or Messiah or Christ, even if he matches every other letter with what it means. If he disregards or fails to teach us the Torah, the wrong guy. So then, as this fellow Kersey Graves, like I said, he's got quite an attitude trying to prove Christianity to be insane. And I'm not trying to be a proponent of the book. You can look at it if you want. You can order it. You can see it online, but it's very disturbing. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Not for the faint of heart, literally. I will recommend this. Todd Bennett wrote this book called The Messiah. I won't quote out of his book, but I read this book last week. He says in here everything that I'm talking about, and he says it very eloquently, including these things about who is Jesus Christ and what does he represent. And he goes through Moses and the Torah and the kings and David and on and on and on and on and on and on and on, proving that Yeshua is the Messiah. I would highly recommend you read this book. He covers all the bases. There's no point in repeating his words. You get a lot out of this. But the point of what we're talking about is to say, here you've got all these different figures, 16, 20, numerous ones, all claiming to be the Christ, all claiming to be the incarnate creator, made flesh, a three-part, a trinity. He was the second of the two, the mediator. How do we know which one to believe? If you compare the Christian story, the answer is just believe it. You don't need proof, just believe it. If you've been given the grace, the benefit, G-R-A-C-E, God's riches that Christ expense. That's the Christian little acronym that we were taught. If you've been given the grace to hear these words from the Christian perspective, just say, okay, ask Jesus in your heart and you're saved. You're going to heaven. Done. No law, no Torah, done away with. Don't even think about it, don't worry about it. I would maintain, based on everything I've read in the Hebrew and studying these things, looking and reading the Torah, look at Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is an encapsulation of the other four books. If it matches the Torah, then anything you read in the New Testament has to be true. But if it doesn't match what the Torah says in the New Testament, I would maintain, as we have these letters written in English, it's suspect, meaning either the person that wrote it was lying, or they were mistaken, or the translators have misrepresented them. And it's not what they said and meant. I personally maintain that Paul did not start the Christian church because Paul himself said, read the book of Acts. 4 times he tried to explain what he said. They shouted him down, started a riot. They finally took him before the Roman governor. He said, Paul, what are you doing? You're causing trouble out there. He says, I'm not trying to cause any trouble. They won't even let me speak. All I said was, I'm not speaking against the temple. I'm not speaking against the Torah. I'm not speaking against our traditions or our elders. All I'm saying, the one we anticipated and expected is this one who came, he showed up, we killed him, but he rose from the dead. That's all I'm saying. But Paul was now claimed to have done away with the Torah, brought in this whole new religion of Christianity, which was against the Torah, and was against the temple, and was against the elders and the traditions and all the teachings. Paul said himself, he never did any of that stuff. So I would maintain that what we have in the Christian, modern, English New Testament is somehow distorted, convoluted, mistaken, which means I can't read the English New Testament and expect I'm reading the truth. Why do I say that? Because the Torah is the filter. If I take the Torah, written in English, you want to get better of filter? More microns down to pure? Read it in Hebrew. Oh, you can't read Hebrew? That's why we're teaching the class, because this is for the illiterate to look at the pictures of the Paleo letters so you can read Hebrew even though you don't read Hebrew. Look at the pictures, learn what the pictures mean. They're keyed to the identity of Mashiach, Ayin Dalet, Ayin Tav. Know what the letters mean. They are the covenant to Israel. To Israel, not that Israel was done away with. Israel was banished and divorced, but Yahweh's calling Israel back to return to the Torah, return to the covenant by these very words, the ketubah that he gave, the prenuptial agreement that he gave to his people Israel at Mount Sinai. Anybody who says it was done away with and he chose a new people that had nothing to regard, it's not the same people. He might have some kind of regard for them. Like I said before, it's kind of like you having a spousal relationship, a prenuptial agreement. That doesn't change, though you might have a tiff with your spouse and not talking to each other for a little while, but you may indeed have another contract with the paper boy or the gardener or the car mechanic, but it's not the same relationship you have with your spouse. The relationship Yahweh had with his spouse, with Israel, is according to these words. So the question is, what do these words say? So I have a handout here that everybody can have. I got 50 pages here. I don't know how many people there are here. Somebody want to hand these out? Not to be a distraction, but I'll go through them here. Here's the point. What if this was, these are the alphabetic letters. Now I've gone through these alphabetic letters previously, telling you what each letter means. I tried to think of it in this way, and this is just my own take on what these letters mean. If you were to look at every letter as the glass slipper. Now there's one little play on words that I wrote at the very top, and I'm sorry it's kind of crammed together. I was trying to put it into I tried to put it into a form that I could get reproduced easily at the printer, and at the last minute I thought of how to play around with these words at the top, so I apologize for that. So I have this little play on words, Cinderella's glass slipper. Well, cinder, those are ashes. So this all has to do with the cinders or the ashes of the red heifer sacrifice outside the chet, outside the gate, that would cleanse people so that they could come into the chet, into the Mishkan. That's what this is all about. How does someone outside of Yahweh's kingdom come into his kingdom, come into the kingdom of heaven? It was because of the ashes of the red heifer that those in contact with the dead were allowed to be cleansed and come back in. It was because of the blood of Yeshua that we are cleansed from our affiliation with the death. You see on people's shirts, lost souls. You know, the dead. Zombies are a big deal these days. Everybody likes the grotesque, the dead. We're supposed to be a kingdom of light and life. There's like this, we have this, especially in American consciousness, this fascination with the culture of the macabre. That's a Hebrew word, by the way, macabre. But anyway, the point is, it was because of our association with the dead that we are allowed to come into the land of the living because of the blood of Yeshua. Typified typology of the red heifer sacrifice. So if you say cinder, that's like the ashes of the red heifer, Cinderella, well, what's Ella mean? That's Aleph Lamed Hey, and it literally means a curse or an oath or an obligation by oath. But up here at the top, it fits Mashiach. Well, the word sign, it's like Sinai or like Chinese, or Mount Sinai, we talked a couple weeks ago, means scholarly or an erudite scholar, and dar means generation. So you could say, well, Sandar Ella has to do with the generation who will take a scholarly approach regarding the curse, the oath, and the obligation by oath. That's what we're talking about. And then the word for glass, well, if you look at Gimel Lamed Hey, Galah, it means to be revealed or discovered. And then slip, Samek Lamed Pei means twist, pervert, and overturn. Sheen Lamed Yod Pei, Shalip means to be unsheathed, like to draw out a sword. And then Por means annulled, frustrated, or violated, and Pura would be like Pori, like the fruit, means Pei Resh Aleph is to bear fruit. It's also a bull and our savagery. You get the word Ephraim. So you put all these things together, and literally Cinderella's glass slipper, though it sounds English, might be Hebrew for the scholarly generation revealing, discovering, like pulling out, unsheathing a sword, the twisted, perverted, overturned fruitfulness which has become annulled and frustrated because of its violation. Cinderella's glass slipper. That's speaking Hebrew, though it sounds speaking English. See what I'm doing? It's kind of playing around with blending languages. Did the same thing with "O say can you see by the dawn's early light," what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming. It sounds like I'm speaking English or the American national anthem, but if you take the phonetics and turn them into Hebrew, it says this whole other story. I think it's Proverbs 12 it sounds like. The point is, what I'm saying is, it's phonetic. Break the phonetics down into the Hebrew letters and look at them. Use the dictionary, look at the letters, and you'll see there's a whole other message, which nobody can say it's wrong. You can call it art, but it's real. Because there you have the word Cinderella's glass slipper, all about finding the true one who became the lost one. And you break those words down into his Hebrew, and it's all about finding the true one who became the lost one because we violated the oath. And it's all about becoming fruitful once again from going back and finding the true Mashiach. It's amazing how these things work. Anyway, I'll go through this kind of quickly. To fit into this time schedule, I can only spend a couple minutes per letter. So I'm going to set this up and then we'll run it through. Here's the thing. Aleph is an ox. Bet is a house. Gimel is a camel. But we also talked about, as we were going through this, that Aleph is the plan, the purpose. Bet is to put something into material form, like the universe. So Aleph, the author, the architect, the artist, put the material universe into form, but he also put himself into form. Bet. Gimel, the sent one, the voyager, the ambassador, the dispatched, the one sent on a mission, the malach. Now, here's the thing. If you read this guy's book about the world's 16 crucified saviors, he'll say, everything we read in the Bible has been shanghaied, has been ripped off and plagiarized from other religions, other cultures, from even 1200 BC. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I'm saying these Hebrew letters came from before creation, and that Yahweh put them into the fabric of creation, like the DNA of creation. And when he spoke the word into Adam, man, that he breathed into, he booted up his brain the way we used to put floppy disks into computers to boot them up. When he spoke Hebrew, he booted it up. And I'll say one more thing about the breath. The word ruach, as in Holy Spirit, ruach hakodesh, this word kadesh with ruach meaning wind, path. If you open up the doors and let the wind blow through, that's the word ruach. It can literally mean like a breeze. If you start with Aleph, and you say, I'm going to let the wind blow on this jet stream, this prescribed path of the wind, and go right down this corridor to the Tav, like bowling a ball, knocking down, aiming towards those pins, like setting an ox that you yoke up and go right down this furrow, plowing until he gets to the mark. These are all Aleph Tav pictures. That this course of the wind is the Ruach, from the Aleph to the Tav, right through this line, Aleph through Tav. That because the letters Aleph through Tav are what the Creator designed from before the creation as the plan, then you could say this course from Aleph to Tav is the Ruach of his breath, HaKodesh, the Kadesh path of the wind. So you could say, well, wait a minute, Ruach HaKodesh, that's the word Holy Spirit. I'm suggesting that the concept of the Holy Spirit is this alphabetic sequence. Not the third person of the Trinity, because that's suspect. The Trinity itself is suspect as a compiled heathen, pagan construct. We don't even have to go there. You could say, well, is the one God going to manifest himself in 3 ways? Look at the alphabet. He manifested himself in 22 ways. Look at the Sephirotic tree. It's manifested in 10 ways. These are all things to discuss. It's nothing to get hung up about. If you say that this prescribed path, Aleph through Tav, is what he designed to be the Ruach HaKodesh, then the Mashiach must fit every letter. Because the entire universe is designed around this particular sequence of every letter. There are those who will say, oh, you know, this letter sequence isn't what it used to be. I've never seen any evidence of that. There was a second shape to the letter Ayin that looked like kind of a knot, a twisted knot. And you could say, well, letter Ayin speaks of wisdom and of judgment. And you could say, well, judgment on the bad side is a hangman's noose. And judgment can get twisted. And the wisdom can get twisted. You know, you can play around with this. It doesn't change the meaning of the letter. So it's not like there's 2 letter Ayins. The point is, there's a lot of these things are debatable. I'm trying to cut through all that and show you what I believe is the truth of the matter, so you'll have something to count on. And once you have this, you can argue and discuss and debate the matters for years based on the truth, which I believe this is the truth. So here's the thing. Why should there be Krishna and Dionysus and Horus and all these other guys? Because in the very beginning, if what these letters actually mean, Yahweh booted up Adam's consciousness and made the fabric of the universe based on what these letters mean, then every story is going to look like this. Every fairy tale is going to look like this. You could even look at Romeo and Juliet. You could look at the, what I'm saying is it's embedded deep in our consciousness, which is why you can appropriate Hebrew and say, if you get real quiet and meditate and you sit there and you look at the scriptures, you'll find it because it's in there somewhere. It's embedded in our DNA as soil, as matter of the universe, but it's also embedded in our consciousness because Yahweh booted it up with Hebrew, the original language. And I know there's some who disagree with that, and you can disagree all you want, but I believe that's so, and that's why we recommended Isaac Moseson's book on Edenics, because he virtually proves the case. As a science, Edenics, going back to the Garden of Eden, it's Hebrew. And so you can either squabble and argue or take it and run with it. Your choice. What I tried to do on this list was say, if these letters were the glass slipper that the Mashiach's foot fits into, how would you render or think of each letter describing him? In other words, okay, Aleph is the plan, the author. What is it saying, though? What is the plan? It's one thing to say it's the plan. What is the plan? Aleph, the determination to produce, the determination. It's like, I will. I'm going to do this. The determination to produce, and thus itself represent, the Aleph represents the notion of the limited apprehensible concept of an unlimited, incomprehensible Ein Sof. In other words, I can only do 2 minutes a letter. I'm just trying to start this off, showing you how I'm going with this. The Ein Sof literally in Hebrew means without limit. Completely unlimited. So you can say, well, Yahweh is the name of the Ein Sof. Excuse me, Yahweh is a limit. It's an oxymoron. You can't say, it's mutually exclusive. You can't use a limit to describe the unlimited one. Even the word Ein Sof is kind of a limit. You can't say the Father, that's a limit. So the unlimited one had to give himself a limit. And I'll tell you, reading this book, this concept was in Greek, Plato, Pythagoras, all these other, Mexico, Quetzalcoatl, and all these other guys had this same concept of the infinite one being too big to make the limited universe, so he created a third party, a second party, the second part of the Trinity, to be the creator. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean Christianity ripped it off. It just means everybody that has any sense of the truth comes up to the same conclusion, whether it was 1200 BC, 1500 BC, or before the flood, or 500 BC. It's all the same story because it's embedded in us. So unlike what this guy's saying, I'm saying what these other stories validate the truth of this Hebrew message. That's the surprise ending to this whole thing. We're not stuck with the scoffing and mocking and those who say, uh-oh, what do I do with this information? We can take heart and say, what do these letters say about themselves? And I've never heard anybody else ever give this kind of a talk, ever. The point is, the fact that you can start with an Aleph as a plan means that the incomprehensible, unlimited one, determined to define himself as comprehensible and limited, and then make a receptor, a bet, a person, a universe, able to contain that limited. So those who are saying you can never comprehend God, they're wrong. Because Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh himself, created the mechanics, the structure of humans' minds, just like a hand fits a glove. He designed the mind to exactly be the receptacle of what he wanted to plug in, which is the revelation of himself. The mind is the bet. The Aleph bet is the bet. The identity of himself is the Aleph fitting the form of the bet. The alphabet itself is the bet. Humanity is the bet. The cosmos of the universe is the bet. This is what he put his revelation of himself into. So to say, well, that could never happen, there's no point in talking about the rest of the story. You've denied Aleph to bet right off the beginning, and that's where your argument has to be. So what I'm saying is there's no point in talking to somebody about salvation and sin and eternal life and hell and anything else if they can't even deal with the fact that the Creator, who is huge, so huge it can't be contained, determined a contained limited aspect and then created a being that he could interface with according to that designed limitation. It's kind of a philosophical sort of argument, but we'll go from there. Bet then, manifest into form. I propose that the Aleph Bet from Aleph to Tav and the pattern of the Mishkan itself is the form that the message is in, the cosmos of matter, Torah, the essence embodied, visible. And a lot of people will break down right there, and you can have no further conversation because they disagree with that. Anybody that says that the infinite creator of the universe cannot put himself into a visible, embodied form denies the meaning of the letter Bet. They can be scholars and they can know Hebrew, but if they deny that, there's no more conversation. Let them go deal with it and argue amongst themselves. It's one thing to say, let's run with this and see where it goes, not have to sit there and squabble about these things. I'm saying these meanings are self-embedded in the alphabet, and you can look on the internet, every single person talking about this alphabet has these same conclusions, but they're not put it in this way. But what I'm saying is that the meanings then, as the gas sipper, is that the Aleph is the one who came to this determination. The Mashiach is the one who came to this determination. Bet, the Mashiach is the one who not only then created the universe, but put himself into a manifested form, as not only the Aleph Bet, but the Torah itself, hence the Torah made flesh, and into human form. And again, you can stall out right there and debate that for the rest of your life. Or you can go on. Gimel, activated. The same way that DNA isn't really alive. DNA is just a system of molecules, right? But yet DNA is a catalyst of production. So the idea of conception of propagation, the Gimel means sent giving. So this concept of activating, Bet being inanimate, right? Gimel means cause it to exist, cause it to spin, cause it to move, cause it to live, engage it into action. So the Gimel also not only is describing the way the universe is designed, but it's also saying the Mashiach then has to be the one who is sent in action, giving, causing life, causing it to all work. Dalet, directional reference, comparison, contrast, variance, remember like the fork in the road? Hang down, Dalet Lamed Lamed literally means hang down, vulnerable, diminished, depleted, detrition, descend, impoverished, sent, evaluating, investigate, asset. Remember what the Melachim did when they came to Sodom and Gomorrah? They had heard that the cry had gone up, so they came down to make sure whether the atrocities going on in the city was as was heard up in the heavens. Yahweh says, I'm the one who listens, and I'm going to come down and evaluate. When Yeshua came 2,000 years ago, he evaluated what happened in Jerusalem, and he said, I would have taken you under my wings, like a hen does her chicks, but you would not. That's it. Because you guys would not have it the way I preferred, you've now done yourselves in, and destruction came to the city. Hey, appearance evidenced as, pointing to, a spectacular, to behold, a mediator. Vav is the number 6. It's rejoicing, it's a fulcrum, it's a connector. What I'm saying is the Mashiach has to be all these things. Zion, take note, only hope, ripped open, scourged, the sacrifice Vav man, it's a sworn oath. Got to go kind of fast here, we only have a few minutes left. Chet. Speaks of death. We talked about that in the very beginning. It also speaks of the kingdom of Yahweh, light and life. Up until now, Krishna and Dionysius and all these other guys fit the bill. They all claim these same things. This is not a strange story. Every one of these other messiahs fits this. Tet, rolled stone, sealed sepulcher, completely dead, inside the fence, fulfilling all requirements. They claim the same thing. Yod, of my hand, the creator, I myself. These first 10 words, as we discussed before, a minion, a 10 group saying this is what this guy's going to do of his own volition. There's a message of the Mashiach right there. So at least out of 12 billion people who have walked the planet, maybe we can narrow it down to 20, but out of those 20, Kaf, zealously a keeper of Torah, filtering the truth, fiction. The given one, John 3:16 talks about, and Lamed, the good shepherd teacher of what? It was said of him, where did he get his shmiha, which is the right to say these things that he was not taught? But even they said of some of these other avatar Christ figures, man, this guy speaks like no other. So even the story we have of Jesus isn't true that he spoke like no other. Apparently he did speak like other people. But the question is, who keeps the Torah? If Yeshua told us to keep the Torah, then it's the only thing that qualifies him out of this entire list as being the true Mashiach, the glass slipper. And it turns out it's right in the middle, the Kaf and Lamed, of the sign of the covenant, which is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And the other interesting thing, as we said, if you look at these lights on the menorah, if you look close at the way the menorah was designed, there were supposed to be 3 bulbs for each of the 6 branches and 4 in the middle. That make 22. So the 4 in the middle line up with, if you put the Hebrew letters in sequence, with Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem. And that word basically means to have power to prevail. It also can, if you start with the Yod, Kaf, Lamed, and if you look at Kaf, Lamed, Mem, it's kind of like where we get the word calamity, where there's something horrible is done to you. And you could say, well, the picture here is this. It's the blessing and the curse. If you keep Kaf, Lamed, the 2 letters, all of these words which were Lamed, Kaf given to you, you will have the power and the capacity to prevail. If you don't, calamity will befall you. It's the blessing and the curse embedded right there in the middle letters. I don't know that these other saviors of the world told their people that they got to go back and keep the Torah of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The guy who's heralded as the one who rested on the 7th day, having created the world in the previous 6. Before we go into these next ones here, because we're running out of time, let me make another note to you. If you know about martial arts, a dojo is the place where you go to practice to get strengthened and trained. The festivals are Yahweh's dojo. If you look at the word, and I don't have it written down here, if you look at the word hul, chet vav lamed, as where we get the word hula, or chayil, chet yod lamed, as we talked before, the week of the letter Resh, I did something which probably people will think I'm a Nazi for doing, but I held up my hand and said, Chayil Yeshua. The word Chayil, Chet Yod Lamed, means the army, the force, to esteem power and strength and might to, but it also means Chet Yod is the living, and Lamed is the shepherd, the instructions, the authority. The life that's in the authority of this shepherd, Chayil, power and strength and might, be to the one who sits on the throne. It talks about in Revelation, to say Chayil Yeshua is this great honor. But the word hul also means to go in a circle, to whirl, to dance, to tell a story. It's also the word for sand. It's where you get the word hula in Hawaiian. It's why this the Nun Psalmic, another one of the embedded patterns, the Nun Psalmic around the central figure, all the letters of the alphabet around the central figure. If you look at the word hul, it also tells you it's a belt, that which goes around. It's an equipment belt. So like in the army, or if you're a contractor, you put your belt on, you have all your tools and gadgets hanging on it. And then there's this word, gird up your loins, a word in the New Testament. The word gird is that word for a belt, or that which goes around that has your equipment on it. The festivals are Yahweh's belt of truth. If you want to gird up your loins with the belt of truth, it's the 7 festivals of Yahweh, and keeping the 7th day of the week as Shabbat, week after week, around and around. Keeping the 7th year of non-farming, as he said in his Torah, and keeping the seventh 7 of the 49, which puts it at Pentecost, which also puts it at the Yovel, the Jubilee, after 49 years, which is around and around, counting the 7th and then the 50th one. What I'm saying is that this is Yahweh's belt of truth. And if you want to unsheath your sword, I heard somebody talk about, okay, if you want to do spiritual warfare, you make the declaration, I put on the belt of truth, I put on the helmet of salvation, take on the shield of faith. For us to regard these words is the doing of it. For us to keep these festivals is the doing of it, not just the speaking about it. And just like the broken vav, if you keep these things fractioned amputated, broken, then the benefit that we have gotten all these years has been fractioned and broken. If you want the full covenant, the Brit HaShalom, we have to keep all these things. That's what this is about. Quickly, I'm going to go through these last ones. Mem talks about being born of a woman, right place, right time, just like all those other guys claimed. Mikvah, counting the schedule, like counting the 49. The 50, Noon, being empowered, effective, equipped, anointed. Apart from me, you can do nothing, he says, but through me, you can do everything. Samach, he claimed, I am the vine, you are the branches, the light of the world, the shemesh, the center candle of the menorah. Servant, igniter, quencher of the branches, which is what the word for star is kakav, which means to extinguish. The book of Revelation, where he had the 7 stars, he says, what's the mystery of the 7 stars? We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Ayin, judge of all the earth, expression of mercy. Wisdom is the beginning of creation. These are ayin concepts. Coming to personally inspect Sodom, Gomorrah, Jerusalem before destruction. And also, there's one other thing, if I can try to mention it, where it just keys to Daniel 12, where he says, none of the wicked will understand. So if you don't understand these things, what does it mean to be wicked? The word for wick is where you get a twist. Something is twisted and distorted. If you can't understand any of this stuff, which is Yahweh's kadosh business as far as I can tell, you might want to go back and find out whether you've got some twisted, wicked thinking and indoctrinations. Because this stuff is the Yashar path of El, Israel. Yod, Shin, Resh is the word Yashar. Yod, Shin, Resh, Yashar. Like the book of Jasher, it's not Jasher, there's no letter J. They took out the Yod and put in a J. Yashar, El. The straight path of El. Like the straight path of the Ruach HaKodesh from Aleph to Tav. Israel is supposed to be on the straight path, no shadow of turning from right to the left, right down the path. If your thinking is wicked, if you've inherited wicked, twisted, convoluted doctrines, you maybe can't understand this. Go back to the straight path, research these things. Don't take my word for it. Don't throw rocks at me. Throw rocks at yourself. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's disturbing. I was shocked, appalled, dismayed, grieved, and in a critical state of my own mental crisis when I came across this information. But fortunately, we were given a help to come out of that place, which is simply to turn to the truth that he's already given us. And the reason why we have inherited all these lies and falsehoods according to the scripture is because our forefathers chose not to regard them. I'm not throwing rocks at any of our forefathers. I'm saying it's been in the heart of our predecessors to turn away, and Yahweh says, fine. The curse is you get what you want. You determine your own curse. You don't want the truth? Fine, take the truth away. You want to have the festivals of your neighbors? Fine, have the festivals of your neighbors. I'll take away the 7 festivals. Oh, you like the way your neighbors celebrate their holy day, Sunday? Fine, tell you what, I'm going to take away the Shabbat and you can have Sunday. See ya. Guess what? The only day where there's any power in keeping it is Shabbat. The only festivals where there's power in keeping it like your equipment belt, gird on with the truth, is in the festivals. For our enemies to have taken it away, taken it out of our consciousness, taken it out of our heart, is to disembowel us. Our only strength is in what Yahweh gave us, and our enemies, like the teaching of Balaam and Balak, tantalize us with the distraction and slip in the distortion and give us different days, different festivals, different words and promises, different requirements of a different covenant, and convince us that it's the truth, to be handed down from generation to generation. This is why we don't regard Christmas, Easter, and Sunday. It's a matter of truth. It's a matter of strength. It's a matter of health. It's a matter of blessing. It's a matter of pleasing Yahweh. His own heart said that it would please me if you kept my word. And we go, no thanks, we're going to do the other things. And say we're doing it up to you. It says in the scriptures, do not learn the way of your heathen neighbors and concoct for yourselves a festival and say you're doing it unto me. Do not do that. Anybody who goes on the internet or looks in various books about what Christmas and Easter is all about is precisely that. So's Sunday, which is why we don't do it. Quickly to finish. As we said with the iron, none of the wicked will understand. If you don't understand, you better go check yourself. Iron has to do with introspection, deep well of the soul. Pei, the Word made flesh, come to tabernacle with us. This is when Yeshua came. Listen, if you want to sing songs like being born in Bethlehem, sing it at Sukkot. Why doesn't anybody have any nice nativity songs at Sukkot? They'll all be pertinent for then. Breathing, Pei, mouth, breathing the breath of Elohim into human flesh. Pei, Zadik, the letter Zadi, El Zadik, Zadikim, Kadosh Kadoshim, El Dabir. The Kadosh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, was also called the Dabir, which is the Word. Robed in white linen, resurrection from the dead, Aaron's rod that budded. These are all the pictures that are embedded in these letters. The hunter, the fisherman, the desired of all ages. What the hunters look for, the trophy, the goal, what the fishermen fish for. The Zadi, the one letter that's not taken, well, two letters, but the Zadi and the Samach are not taken over from Greek into Latin into English. Certain of these letters only exist in Hebrew, like the of the Het, because it's a set-apart language which nobody else wants. That's why these other guys ripped off everything except for the truth. Kuf, the glory, the kavod of Yahweh, obscured the back view, kicked at by the scoffers. It also means visitation, future return. The one obligated, the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke that went through the split animals with the covenant made with Abraham, the one obligated to pay the price of the infraction of the covenant, which is why Yeshua was sent to pay the cost of the infraction of the covenant instead of putting the burden on the man. That's a whole other story, but Resh, come to gather his own. Israel, as a hen would take under its wings, the unifier of the tribes, all authority given unto him in heaven and earth. The Ben David, conquering king. Shin, El Shaddai, priest of war, robes dipped in blood, fire and teeth, consuming enemies. Ask in my name, and there will be provisions for his own people. Treading the winepress of his wrath upon those who hate him, as said in the scriptures. Tav, the maker and finisher, and as he said over 80 times in the book of Ezekiel, then you'll know that I am Yahweh. What do you mean, then we'll know? When you see everything as planned, Aleph, accomplished, Tav, according to the story, then you'll know that I am Yahweh. But you can't extract the Kaf and Lamed and claim it's the same guy. Thus, you could call him what you will. If you like the name Jesus and you want to call him Jesus, go ahead. The angel didn't say to use that name. His mother didn't call him to dinner using that name, and his father didn't use that name. If you want to use that name, that's fine. But if that name represents the guy that abolished the Torah, having so-called fulfilled it in himself, so that you don't have to, read Todd's book. Read the Hebrew alphabet. Read Deuteronomy. Read Isaiah. Read Nehemiah chapter 9. Read Ezekiel. Read every book in the Tanakh. Every single book talks about this. David talked about it. Solomon talked about it. It talks about keeping the words of Yahweh as he originally intended, and that every single time we thought it didn't matter, our enemies overwhelmed us, we were taken into captivity, we were lost, bewildered, our minds and our beings distorted, and we even ended up eating foods which changed our body physicality towards destruction instead of towards virulence, which is why he gave us the kosher laws of eating the clean foods. And if you don't want to believe it, eat what you will and suffer the consequences. It's your choice. You can believe whatever you want. And the last thing to say, as I said before, I was having a conversation with somebody and said, the things I can believe out of the New Testament, I have to filter with the Torah. If they agree with the Torah, I can believe it's true. If not, then it's suspect. They were appalled. They were horrified that I would say such a thing. Said, I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe that you discredit the fact that I can read this English New Testament. I said, but you're filtering the New Testament by that white page between Malachi and Matthew. The only things that get into the New Testament are the things that don't contradict the New Testament. I'm saying the opposite. The only thing that I am going to believe in the New Testament is what the Torah talks about. Everything else is suspect. And this person said, and this is a warning to any of you, and this, watch